you opened your eyes to the damp air creeping through the narrow cracks of cold stone beneath you. The distant echo of your own silence felt oppressive. A void so complete it magnified even the soft hum of your breathing. Above, the ceiling hung low, draped in moss, shadowed beneath flickering, hesitant light. The rough floor pressed hard beneath your feet, saturated with the age-old mold that clung to every corner of this forgotten labyrinth. As you moved forward, the stony walls grazed your hands, drying your skin, while the chill in the gloom seeped through your thin clothes, barely shielding your weary body. The crushing monotony of the path weighed heavily, every turn a hollow promise of escape, each step a reluctant return to the same mortal silence that threatened to swallow your mind whole. The air, faint, earthy scent, mingled with the sulphurous fatigue, textured by time itself. You tried to anchor yourself in the small tasks that remained, tracing the worn marks etched into the floor, listening for the faint echoes of your motion, slowly polishing the cold stone with your fingertips to stave off the sensation of absolute emptiness. In this silent prison, serving the labyrinth was less about walking and more about enduring the suffocating weight of ceaseless solitude. The silence inside the Hawara Labyrinth in Japan bore a different weight, something ancient and unforgiving, clutching your spine even before the first pale glow of dawn could seep in. Outside, the winter dawn spilled a pale, muted blue over the slumbering village, blanketed by a thin haze, where frost crackled softly beneath hesitant steps. The threadbare wool of your only cloak scratched against your skin, carrying the sharp scent of old smoke drifting lazily from distant hearths. Your hand trembled ever so slightly, a tremor barely perceptible, as you steadied yourself against the cold stone wall. If today a dead phone battery sends you into a quiet panic, imagine the despair of watching your last splinter of firewood succumb to smoke and ash in this timeless quiet. You shuffled through the routine with painstaking slowness, checking the faded carvings, aligning your breath with the rhythm of footsteps swallowed by stone, savoring a brief flicker of warmth as you huddled around a communal fire with unseen neighbors. That fragile moment of shared heat, transient and tender, flickered briefly before creeping shadows reminded you of what lay ahead. Suddenly, a hush fell deeper than before. The restless murmurs of unseen creatures abruptly ceased. Even the faint rustle of leaves beyond the labyrinth's edge seemed to pause, as if the world was holding its breath. You caught a flicker of exchange between those nearby, glances laden with unspoken worry, pressing heaviness behind calm eyes. The collective silence twisted tighter, threading your heartbeat with quiet dread. Hey, before Morpheus takes you fully, do a quick check to see if you're still subscribed. For some, the button disappeared, and I don't want you to miss the next stories to sleep. Take a moment and leave a like as soft as a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this little corner of calm alive. Thanks for being part of it. You move forward, each step deliberate, the cold stone floor pressing bitterly beneath your bare feet. The dampness clung to your skin, seeping through the thin fabric of your clothes like a slow, persistent ache. Your fingers trailed absent-mindedly along the rough walls, their uneven surface offering a fragile anchor as shadows danced weakly in the flickering light above. The moss overhead curled and quivered subtly, its faint green hues muted by age and silence, as if reluctant to breathe life into this forgotten place. The sound of your breathing rhythmically filled the narrow passage, full, a soft, urgent hiss that mingled with distant, hollow echoes. You paused, listening closely, wondering if the silence itself held intention, thick as the stagnant air suffocating the labyrinth's corridors. Your heart beat slow but heavy, not from exertion, but from the oppressive stillness, urging you onward without promise. Ahead, a faint glimmer, tiny crystals embedded in the wall's surface. You hesitated before approaching, your breath forming small ghosts in the chilly air. As your palms settled against the cool rock, the crystals felt like shards of glass, masking centuries of secrets, glinting with a cold fire that neither welcomed nor warned, just existed. The scent here shifted slightly, earthy now, touched with a faint metallic tang, like forgotten veins of ore hidden deep beneath the surface. You took a slow step onward, the rough stones scraping softly against your shoe's worn sole. The path curved sharply, revealing a broader chamber carved unevenly by time's relentless patience. The air sharpened, carrying with it the faint crackle of dried leaves from somewhere far above, rustling hesitantly in a space unseen. The chamber's ceiling arched overhead, dotted with patches of damp mold that dripped intermittently, the drops making slow, irregular beats against the stones below, echoing like a fragile heartbeat within the vast silence. Leaning into the coldness, you allowed your eyes to adjust fully to the gloom. Shadows deepened in the corners, pooling like ink that threatened to swallow light. The floor here was rougher, scattered with tiny pebbles and shattered bits of forgotten rock that crunched softly underfoot. You bent knee to floor, running fingers over faded carvings, worn smooth by countless forgotten hands. Each groove and indentation felt like a whispered story, faint, unfinished, but heavy with the weight of time. A flicker of warmth pulled you away from the cold stone. Faint golden light spilled from a narrow fissure in the far wall. You rose slowly to investigate, the chill of your skin meeting the gentle heat that bloomingly radiated from the tiny. As you stepped closer, the sharp scent of smoldering wood mingled with the dry dust, wrapping around you as comforting as a half-remembered dream. You pressed your hand carefully against the edge of the fissure. The rock was warm, porous, unexpectedly alive. Behind the subtle glow, a hollow space yawned, just large enough to offer refuge from the endless march of stone corridors. You slid inside, the air growing noticeably warmer and drier. The scent of smoke lingered, soft and steady, like the echo of a long-extinguished fire. Sitting down heavily, you folded your cloak tightly around your shoulders, feeling the familiar scrape of wool against worn skin. Your breath slowed, matching the gentle crackle from somewhere deeper within the niche. You settled into the quiet, letting the warmth seep in, a slender thread of solace amid the labyrinth's chilling grasp. For a moment, the pressing weight of solitude weakened, replaced by the fragile hum of survival. The careful balance between the creeping cold and the flicker of fragile flame. Outside the narrow refuge, the dark maze seemed to pulse with quiet watchfulness, shadows lengthening toward you as if curious, waiting. The memory of distant voices, barely heard, danced teasingly at the edge of your awareness. Murmurs carried lightly on an unseen current, like the hushed rustle of leaves. But no footsteps approached. No breath disturbed the cold air. You could almost believe the labyrinth itself was holding its breath, waiting alongside you, caught in the threadbare seam between despair and hope. Your fingers slowly traced the edges of the crack again, memorizing every uneven ridge and subtle color change. The cold was patient here. The stones seemed to breathe beneath your touch, whispering ancient secrets you couldn't quite grasp. You closed your eyes for a moment, welcoming the dim warmth, the steady rhythm of your heartbeat, grounding you within this endless twilight. Yet the quiet was not without its own unease. Beneath the lull, a subtle tension remained, a faint current of something unspoken, threading the air. You felt it, pressing lightly against the skin of your mind. An unfinished thought shimmering just beyond reach. The stillness deepened once more, drawing tighter, wrapping around your senses, like a whispered warning you could barely understand. The cloak's edges shifted softly, with the slight draft that slipped through the fissure, carrying the faintest hint of something new, a trace of earth or smoke that didn't quite belong inside the labyrinth. You shifted your weight slowly, attuned now. Sound, every subtle movement beyond your fragile refuge. As the shadows lingered near the edge of your vision, you realized the path ahead was not simply one to be walked, but a living labyrinth watching you back, patient, silent, and tightly wound around a secret still waiting to unravel. Then, from deep within the silent maze, came a sound unlike before, soft, deliberate, a single echo, sharp and close, as if something unseen had taken its first measured step in a long, endless night. You held your breath, the faint echo of that soft, deliberate step unspooling through the stillness like a thread pulled taut. The labyrinth steadied its ancient gaze on you, the shadows bowing in a silent dance, hesitant but unyielding. Your fingers curled tightly against the ridged rock as you shifted, every small movement weighted, deliberate. The cold seeped deeper into your skin, settling like a whispered warning beneath the thin weave of your cloak. Each breath you drew was shallow, measured, a quiet rhythm keeping time with the slow drip of water from the damp ceiling. The tiny plinks faded and returned like the heartbeat of the stone itself, marking the passage of moments that refused to hurry. Eyes half closed, you allowed the darkness to settle around you again. Thick and familiar, the faint warmth still clung softly to your shoulders, a fragile ember muttering to the night. Steeling yourself, you pressed forward, feet sliding cautiously over the slick stones. The faint metallic tang lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of damp earth and something old, something forgotten but not gone. Your hands traced the walls once more, feeling their cold roughness like a fragile lifeline in the immense quiet. Each texture was a secret, each groove a trace of countless nameless wanderers who had come before you, swallowed by time and shadow. A faint murmur teased your ear, barely there, like fabric brushing in the wind. But no shape moved into the dim. You flattened your palm against the stone and leaned in, lips parting slightly as you listened to the muted pulse of silence. Somewhere far above, the labyrinth breathed a slow, aching sigh, as if mourning its own endless secrets. The corridor wound ahead in a slow curve, the walls narrowing, closing in just enough to press on your chest. Your feet whispered across scattered pebbles, the harsh crunch small but somehow immense in the overwhelming quiet. It took a measured effort to keep steady, balancing between the urge to flee and the steady insistence to move onward. The flickering light from your unseen source danced weakly, revealing glimpses of blackened moss and fractured stone. You paused at a narrowing, breath-catching, when a trickle of colder air slipped past, carrying a faint scent of smoke. Not the dry smoke from earlier, but new and sharp, like fingers brushing against flame. A tiny spark of warmth flickered in your mind, fragile and elusive, beckoning, yet distant. Your hand hovered over the wall, tracing a frail line, winding toward a shadowed corner where the light refused to chase. Careful steps led you forward. The floor beneath was uneven, each pebble a minor threat. You felt the stone beneath your fingers grow warmer. The dry dust settled lightly but with purpose. A subtle hum rose around you, the faint resonance of the labyrinth's bones shifting, ancient and slow, You rested briefly, letting your skin drink the warmth, your breath deepening in soft waves that barely disturb the quiet. A muted scrape echoed from just around the bend, a sound so soft it was almost imagined. Your muscles tensed, every nerve alive with quiet anticipation. You slowed to a crawl, fingertips grazing the wall's craggy surface, as if reading a delicate map written in shadow and stone. The faintest wisp of smoke curled from somewhere ahead, thin and curling, blurring the edges of reality. The way forward opened into a small chamber carved rough and deep. Mottled patches of moss clung even here, their life clinging beneath layers of dust and neglect. Streaks of ancient mineral veins shone faintly, like veins of silver submerged in stone. You moved deeper into the room, senses stretched thin and alert. The warm hum beneath your feet seemed to pulse stronger here, as though the labyrinth itself was gathering breath. There, in the farthest corner, a fragile glow flickered, the afterglow of burnt wood smoldering in a shallow pit lined with cracked stones. The smoke rose in lazy spirals, subtle and sweetened by time. You lowered yourself slowly to the ground, the rough stone pressing through your clothes as you settled beside the faint fire. The warm breath of the flame kissed your skin, mingling strangely with the cold that lingered outside the flimsy barrier of heat. Your fingers pressed once again against the cool stone beside you, tracing the convoluted patterns worn smooth over years of touch. The labyrinth hummed quietly now, a slow, steady beat beneath your skin, threaded with the whispers of those long disappeared. A distant sigh seemed to ripple through the air, the soft exhale of a world holding on to its last secrets. The chamber wrapped around you like a fragile cocoon, its shadows softened by the golden light. You could almost taste the quiet, thick and weighty but familiar, like old leather holding forgotten memories. The smoke's faint scent filled your lungs, grounding you in the present, as past and future stretched thin and intangible. Beyond the flickering refuge, the labyrinth's silence thickened, the shadows pooled in the corners. Restless now, almost shifting as if reluctant to let you rest. The delicate dream of warmth faltered against the slow, creeping certainty that the night was never truly empty. The soft echo of footsteps returned, deliberate, slow, unmoving, weaving through the stone maze like a ghostly current. Your heart tightened at the sound, a cold tether pulling your senses taut. The flickering light wavered, trembled, almost giving way to the dark. The faint breath of the labyrinth brushed your neck with icy fingers. And then the light caught a single glimmer just beyond the fire, a faint streak cutting through the darkness, sharp and cold. You turned your head slowly to follow its path, breath hitching. There, at the edge of vision, the shadow coalesced into a shape, an unseen watcher stepped from the gloom, silent and deliberate, breaking the endless night. You froze as the shadow stepped quietly from the gloom, a slow silhouette folding into the faint, flickering light. The outline remained just beyond clear sight, blurred by the dim, breathing haze of smoke curling from the dying warmth at your side. Your skin prickled under the weight of stillness, every nerve urging you to hold. The slender thread of calm twisting delicately between tension and quiet. The labyrinth seemed to lean in, its ancient walls breathing low and slow, pressing the hush deeper into the hollow spaces around you. Your fingers trembled, but did not release the rough stone's reassuring ridges. The scent of smoldering wood, mixed with damp earth, hung heavily, weaving a thick, textured air that clung inside your lungs like soft chains of silence. You blinked slowly, your eyes adjusting to the subtle shifting forms in Shadowlands, where light barely spilled. The watcher's figure remained motionless, a presence not quite solid, neither threatening nor welcoming, simply there, suspended in the reluctant pause between moments. You felt the thick fog of unease coil low in your belly, but fought to steady your breath, slipping into the rhythm of slow, silent waiting. The tiny crackle beside you softened as the ember's breath slowed. Your cloak shifted gently as you moved a fraction closer to the warmth, the threadbare wool whispering faintly against stone, a delicate sound barely there amid the cavern's heavy quiet. The murmur of distant, unseen creatures had fallen away entirely, swallowed by the labyrinth's weighty silence. Only your heartbeat had the courage to persist, a tentative thump beneath your ribs, marking time with every cautious, deliberate breath. As you drew in another slow, measured breath, the watcher's shape seemed to breathe with the space around it, merging subtly with the ancient stone. For a breath, the labyrinth felt unexpectedly alive, as if it inhaled the fragile flame's warmth and exhaled the thick darkness folded over the floor. You traced the thin line of smoke curling toward the vaulted ceiling, watching it disappear into the cold air like a whispered thread pulled taut by unseen fingers. Your gaze dropped to the floor, where scattered pebbles glinted faintly under the flickering light. The cold beneath your feet was insistent, biting at your skin through the thin fabric, a slow sting that grounded you within the endless march through stone corridors. You stepped carefully, the rough ground crunching softly, mindful not to scatter the quiet air that pressed so heavily, suffocating and dense. A weak draft teased you suddenly, sliding past your neck like a breath from some ancient mouth, carrying a faint, sharp scent of something metallic beneath the earthiness. Tiny hints of iron, or perhaps rust, hidden beneath layers of decay and shadow. You shivered, the chill sneaking deeper under your cloak, whispering secrets your mind desperately resisted unraveling. Your fingertips tightened their grip on the wall's cold surface, tracing tiny ridges worn smooth by time, a silent anchor for a soul teetering on the edge of collapsing. You moved forward again, each step an exercise in slow patience, navigating the narrowing passage as it curved into a low-ceilinged alcove. The air shifted, growing heavier with the scent of forgotten fires mingled with the staleness of centuries. Above, clusters of blackened moss clung to odorous stone, dripping dampness in uneven rhythms, a faint explosion of tiny water beats that echoed like sorrowful taps against the vast silence. Inside the cramped space, your eyes caught the faint, ghostly glow of pale crystals embedded deep within the rock face. Their cold fire flickered weakly, neither inviting nor repelling, and you reached out to touch them, feeling their smooth, sharp edges press against your fingertips. The chilling touch gripped your skin, sending shivers that threaded slowly down your arms, a cold reminder of the labyrinth's unyielding presence. The moments stretched as you retreated, shifting your weight slowly back down to the rough stone floor, settling beside the faint fire's dying glow. The warmth had grown weaker, but clung nevertheless, a tenuous promise of safety amid the relentless cold. You listened to the soft drip overhead, the slow, uneven pulse of water, heartbeat of the ancient walls surrounding you. Your thoughts dulled beneath the weight of waiting, the thick air melting away the edges of fear, even as you remained vigilant. You wrapped your cloak tighter, each fold pressing a quiet comfort against your chilled skin. The fragile flame sputtered once, then settled, the soft hiss of smoke swirling like half-remembered lullabies, nearly lost within the labyrinth's heavy breath. Suddenly, a faint fragment of sound pulled you sharply into the present, a subtle scrape, far off yet distinctly deliberate, threading the silence with uncertainty. The labyrinth shivered, as if awakened momentarily from a long, dreamless sleep. You pressed closer to the warmth, your breath catching harsh and shallow, but controlled, carefully masking the quickening beat of your heart. Your eyes searched the gloom, beyond the flickering fire, shadows shifting at the edges, moving like tendrils stretched thin against the dim light. The watcher was gone. Only the lingering echo of a step remained, precise, calm, almost thoughtful, leaving a gap in the silence wide enough to swallow your breath. You focused on the faint trail left behind, eyes narrowing as the flickering light caught a glimpse of something new. A delicate glimmer, too quick to define, flickered near the moss-hidden recesses, a shard of something smooth and cold, unlike the rough edges of the labyrinth you'd come to know. A whisper of air slid past your ear, carrying a breath of smoke threaded with something entirely unfamiliar, a scent that spoke of movement beyond this stagnant place. You rose slowly, muscles coiled softly beneath the heaviness of your cloak, every step measured and quiet as you moved toward the source of the subtle disturbance. The fire's last ember winked into darkness behind you, swallowed by shadows that whispered promises of unseen paths and secrets still waiting to unfold. Ahead, the walls seemed to close tighter, the narrow corridor folding in on itself, holding its breath as you stepped forward into the uncertain night. And then, from the farthest depths of the maze, a low murmur rose, not footsteps, but a sound, layered beneath the quiet, like the slow, deliberate turning of time itself, pulling you deeper into the labyrinth's dark heart, where the next fragment of the story waited, just out of reach. You remained motionless for a long moment, eyes tracing the wavering outline of that silent figure. The faint heat from the dying fire brushed your skin, fragile and fleeting, as if the warmth itself were a fragile thread unspooling delicately in the oppressive cold. The watcher's stillness was both a weight and a release, a frozen note struck in the unbroken symphony of silence. You breathed slowly, the sharp edge of your breath dissolving into the stagnant air, barely stirring the cloaked shadows that crouched just beyond vision. The labyrinth's ancient bones seemed to hold their breath, waiting with you in the hollow space between moments. Slowly, you felt the steady pull of the stone beneath your hands, rough and real. The texture grounded you, granular, cold, unyielding, a reminder that beneath the weight of uncertainty, something was known, something steady and unbroken. The faint scent of smoldering wood lingered, quiet but persistent, weaving itself through the air like a lingering song half remembered. Your fingertips slipped along the coarse wall, tracing the shallow grooves worn smooth by long-forgotten hands. Each mark carried a silent history, a slow pulse of presence in the vast emptiness. The watcher remained motionless, a shadow beyond your reach, their presence a question marked in the faint light. That simple stillness pressed heavy against your senses, a thick curtain shielding a deeper enigma. A sudden cold draft brushed warmly against your neck, taste of hidden ore, faint beneath the dust and decay. The air felt alive, carrying unseen currents as if the labyrinth was breathing underneath you. Lungs slow and deep. You turned your head slowly, careful not to rattle the fragile calm, seeking any hint beyond the shadows. In the dim corner where the firelight curled and faded, a soft scraping flickered. The sound was almost denied by the overwhelming quiet, a hesitant, deliberate brushing against stone, slow and measured. Your heartbeat slipped into synchrony with the faint sound, a trembling rhythm coaxed out from the long silence. Inch by careful inch, you moved forward, a slow dance balanced precariously on patience and resolve. The floor beneath your feet shifted, scattered with tiny stones that crunched softly, sharp, crisp underfoot, breaking the thick, muffled blanket of the labyrinth. Your breath slowed even more. Each exhale, a small cloud in the cold air. The faint shimmer of crystals gleamed just ahead, fragile gleams catching the flicker of dying flame. The walls curved gently inward, narrowing before plunging into deeper dark. You knelt next to the fire's last glow, hands warming against the fragile heat, pressing your palms flat on the uneven stone. The cracked earth beneath seemed to root deep, steadying the thin warmth like a delicate heartbeat threading through the vast biting cold. Above, water droplets began their slow fall again, soft pinpricks of sound punctuating the stillness, like the gentle ticking of endless hours folding softly over one another. The watcher's form flickered at the periphery, a suggestion of movement too slight to confirm. You felt your muscles coil beneath the cloak, every sense sharpened to the slow stretch of the maze around you. An indistinct murmur teased the edge of your hearing. Not footsteps, but something deeper. The labyrinth sighing, folding layers of sound and shadow together, whispering secrets, thick as the moss that clung softly overhead. Your fingers brushed the worn carvings near the fire, tracing the paths etched by long-ago wanderers, their hands trembling like yours, lost in quiet vigil. The stone vibrated faintly beneath your touch, alive in an ancient pulse. A faint warmth bloomed quietly at your fingertips, not from the fire, but from within the layered rock itself, a secret urging beneath the surface, dim and persistent. The delicate crescent of embers pulsed weakly, flickering in slow, sleepy waves, warmth in slow retreat. The smoke curled in tight spirals, carrying whispers of long-past flames and soft ash, a memory hanging thin in the cold, gray air. The smell was faint now, but insistent. Tangs of resin, burnt wood, and old roots tangled beneath the earth's skin. Outside the fragile sanctuary, the silence thickened, a heavy curtain drawing close. The walls seemed to breathe with slow, measured weight, stones shifting imperceptibly, like the turning of time itself, patient, unrelenting. Your cloak tightened around your shoulders, a shield against the creeping cold that seeped deeper with each passing breath. Then, from the depths, where the shadows curled and pooled like storm clouds, came a breath of sound, subtle, intentional, and soft as folding paper. It was not quite a step, but the labyrinth's voice, a slow, rhythmical pulse vibrating through the very floor beneath you. Your eyes flicked upward, searching the darkness where the ceiling dropped low. Shadows bent toward the flame. That breath of sound drew together the stillness, pulling taut the fragile thread between fear and quiet strength. You rose slowly, steadying yourself against the rough stone, aware of every sensation, the cool grit, the faint warmth, the silent watcher no longer visible, but lingering in your senses. The path before you closed slowly, the stone folding inward, narrowing the way with soft inevitability. Your heart became a steady drum beneath your ribs, each beat measured and deliberate, harmonized with the slow pulse of the labyrinth itself, a rhythm ancient and waiting. The soft, deliberate murmur rose again, weaving through the cold air like a thread of smoke, hinting at movement just beyond the veil of shadows. And just as your hand reached toward the dark curve ahead, a faint glimmer caught the edge of your vision, a sudden flash of cold light, sharp and electric, like a silent signal pulsing from the depths, promising that whatever lay beyond was beginning to stir. You shifted, the cold stone floor barely yielding beneath your weight. The dying ember's glow flickered faintly, casting elongated shadows that stretched and twitched like restless memories over the rough-hewn walls. Each breath was slow, measured, a deliberate rhythm in the thick air, laced with the scent of smoldering wood and dry earth, the faint, lingering warmth clinging softly to your skin like a desperate promise. The labyrinth held still around you, its silent pulse nearly palpable under the fragile veil of heat. Your fingers traced the familiar, worn carvings near the fire's edge, the grooves cool and smooth beneath your touch. Time seemed to brush against them lightly, as if the stones absorbed every silent step. And whispered thought that had traversed these corridors long before. The faint crackle of smoke drifted upward, curling in tight, delicate spirals that dissolved into the shadows above. Fragile evidence of survival amid the engulfing cold. A breath brushed past your neck, subtle and cool, carrying with it a whisper of smoke tinted with a sharper, foreign scent. Something metallic beneath the dried leaves and ash. You turned slowly, eyes narrowing in the gloom toward the narrowing corridor ahead. The faint light from your refuge barely illuminated its curve, the walls closing in like the darkening pages of a story meant to be told in measured steps. Beneath your feet, the gritty stone felt uneven, scattered with tiny pebbles that shifted faintly with each careful movement. With a steadying breath, you rose, drawing your cloak tighter around your shoulders. The soft scrape of cloth against stone echoed gently, as if the labyrinth itself was listening. Its ancient walls leaning inward with quiet expectancy. Every sound seemed magnified in the heavy silence, a slow drip from a distant ceiling, the faint rustle of moss settling in the humid gloom, the whisper of your breathing mingling with the rhythmic beating of your heart. You stepped forward, the chill seeping deeper into your skin, crawling beneath thin fabric and muscle like a silent thread winding through bone. Your fingers grazed the jagged edges of mineral veins running along the wall, cold, sharp, and oddly alive under your touch. The faint glimmer of crystals caught the weak light, their brittle surfaces fractured, yet gleaming softly, like distant stars reluctant to give way to the darkness. The air thinned here, heavy with the scent of forgotten fires and damp earth. The weight of unspoken histories pressing down like a sigh slipped between stone and shadow. The corridor bent slowly, and you moved with it, each step precise and deliberate, grounding yourself in the tactile world as your mind balanced on the edge of the unknown. A soft murmur echoed faintly, not footsteps, but a vibration deep within the labyrinth's bones, a shifting of ancient tiles settling beneath the relentless march of time. Your breath caught, mingling uneasily with the stale air, thickening as it passed over the faint trace of smoke curling from an unseen crack. Ahead, the path opened into a narrow chamber, carved roughly from the living stone. The faint glow of dying embers pooled here, fragile and hesitant, a small island of warmth in the crushing cold. The walls bore traces of wear, patches of blackened moss wove silently with mineral veins, and scattered stones crunched softly beneath foot. You lowered yourself gently to the floor, the cold grit pressing through the threadbare cloak as you settled near the fragile flame. The warmth blossomed slowly, a tender pulse under your palms, steadying you against the unrelenting chill. Your gaze drifted upward, the ceiling arched low, mottled with damp moss that exhaled faint, irregular drips of water. Each tiny plink echoed across the chamber, a soft metronome heralding the unyielding passage of time. Shadows pooled thickly in the corners, deep wells of darkness that seemed to breathe quietly, waiting. Outside the labyrinth's silence thickened, a living shroud tightening with each measured breath. The faintest trace of movement stirred across your peripheral vision, a hesitation, a shift in the gloom. Your senses sharpened, every nerve alight with cautious anticipation. The air bore the faintest hum, like a distant pulse vibrating through the stones themselves. Your fingers trembled slightly, but clung firmly to the edge of the cracked hearth, tracing the fractured stone's contours, while your breath slowed, deep and even. The smoke curled into slender spirals, dissolving softly against the chill air. For a moment, the labyrinth ceased to be a prison, transforming instead into an ancient, watchful presence, patient, unyielding, wrapped in quiet waiting. Then, from somewhere deep within the maze, a sound emerged, subtle, deliberate, a step just beyond the reach of vision. It was slow, cautious, but resolute. Your heart contracted, a taut line stretched between dread and the fragile thread of hope you clung to. The shadows seemed to pulse in response, thickening and pulling closer, like a tide drawn inward by some unseen force. You rose slowly, the low warmth peeling away as your cloak shifted against the cold stone. Your breath misted faintly in the dropping temperature, an echo of life in the dense stillness. The passage ahead whispered your name, folding inward like a secret about to unfold. Your hand brushed against the wall, steadying yourself as the subtle scent of metal grew stronger, sharp and insistent beneath the earthiness. The faint glimmer flickered again, sharper this time, like a signal pulsing through the gloom. The labyrinth's heartbeat matched your own, slow and steady. With deliberate care, you stepped forward, drawn deeper into the narrowing corridor, where the darkness thickened to velvet. And just as the walls seemed to close completely, the silence fractured. A sound, clear and unmistakable, uncoiling through the air, a whispered breath that carried a name known only to the stones. The labyrinth was no longer waiting. It was beginning to speak. You stepped cautiously from the fragile warmth of the fire's dying glow, the air immediately reclaiming its icy grip, pressing cold fingers through the thin weave of your cloak. The narrow chamber seemed to exhale behind you, every droplet hanging overhead, resuming its slow fall. The water's plinks resonating softly like a careful, fading heartbeat. Your breath lingered as gentle mist before dissolving into the stale air, thick with history and quiet decay. Your fingers found the rough stone once more, tracing the delicate line where the warmth faltered against creeping cold. The moss overhead quivered softly, reluctant to surrender even its faintest hint of life in this chilled, forgotten place. You let your palm glide over the tiny crystals embedded in the wall, shards of pale in stone, their fragile brilliance flickering uncertainly in the dim light, neither reassuring nor threatening, but simply marking time. Each step you took writhed softly against the uneven stone floor, fragile pebbles crunching beneath foot in muted protest. The labyrinth drew close, the walls folding inward, narrowing the path into a suffocating passage where shadows pooled thick and measured your every motion. The metallic tang in the air intensified subtly, a sharp whisper beneath the more familiar earthy scent, curling around you like a slow promise of secrets yet unrevealed. Ahead, the corridor curved sharply into a shallow alcove, the ceiling pressing low enough to brush your fingertips. You hesitated briefly, feeling the dense silence coil tighter, a palpable tension threading the air, subtle but insistent, like the labyrinth itself was watching, waiting. Your heartbeat, water echoing overhead, a rhythm as ancient and unwavering as the stones surrounding you. The faint glow of pale crystals shimmered ahead, their light casting long, fragile shadows that wove together with the slow swirl of smoke hovering near the ground. You moved forward with deliberate care, fingertips grazing the rugged wall, feeling the cool, uneven surface press against your skin. The soft crackle of a dying ember whispered beneath your feet, a fading pulse, trying to hold back the advancing cold. The air tasted of old smoke and wet stone, mingled with a new, metallic sharpness that prickled your senses, raising fine hairs along the back of your neck. You shifted slightly, your cloak rustling lightly as you settled against the wall, the wool scratching softly, a rough comfort amidst the chill's persistent crawl. Outside your fragile cocoon of warmth, the labyrinth stretched endless, vast in its muted menace. Shadows twisted and lengthened, bolder now, pressed deep into corners where the faint light couldn't reach. You could feel the silence thickening, not empty, but full, hungry in its patient stillness. The faintest brush of movement teased your peripheral vision, just beyond sharp focus, a whisper of shape that melted when faced directly. Your breath slowed, steadying, as the delicate ember beneath you flared briefly, a gentle bloom of gold in the surrounding gloom. The warmth pulsed softly through your fingertips, a tether to something real amid the encroaching dark. The slow drip overhead marked time, each drop falling unevenly, like uneven breaths expelled by the stone labyrinth's ancient lungs. A soft murmur, barely a vibration, touched your ears. Not a voice, nor footsteps, but a low hum, as if the maze itself was shifting, gathering depth beneath the surface. Your senses flickered in response, every nerve alive with tentative awareness. The watcher's presence lingered in the space around you, invisible, yet unmistakably close, as if folded into the very fabric of shadow and stone. You rose slowly, careful to cradle the flicker of warmth still clinging to you. Your feet whispered against scattered pebbles, cautious steps guiding you toward the narrowing path, threading deeper into the labyrinth's core. The walls pressed nearer now, the passage squeezing tight, cool air whispering sharp hints of rusted iron and crushed leaves. The metallic scent grew stronger, an unseen pulse rippling through the stale air. Your hand brushed along the cool wall, fingers seeking purchase on tiny mineral ridges gleaming faintly in the muted light. The crystals glittered with subdued fire, silent, watching their cold shimmer a stark contrast to the ember's weak glow. The scent of smoldering wood faded, replaced by dry earth and something older, more insistent, threading the air like a slow heartbeat that was not your own. You paused at a corner where the stone curved sharply, feeling the subtle shift in air pressure. A breathless moment hung in waiting. The faintest stir of movement brushed the gloom, hesitant and deliberate, threading through shadows like a slow, careful dance. Your heart tightened, a steady drum beneath ribs that sought calm but recognized the tightening coil of anticipation. The labyrinth's breath slowed, stones settled softly beneath countless forgotten footsteps, the silence swelling and contracting like waves lapping steadily on an unseen shore. Your cloak trailed lightly against crumbling edges, the soft scrape a whisper in the vast quiet. You traced a fragile line of etching on the wall, tiny grooves worn by hands long gone, each mark a story folded silently into stone and shadow. Ahead, The faint glow pulsed subtly, a pulse not from flame, but from deep within the rock, a quiet beating like a pulse beneath your skin. The warmth was elusive, yet persistent, a slender thread winding through the layers of cold and shadow that clung tightly to the labyrinth's bones. You drew a slow breath, feeling the tension ebb just slightly, a fragile pause held in the vast, silent pulse between moments. The path before you folded inward like a secret yet to be shared. The darkness deepened and settled. The faint glimmer flickered once more, sharp and sudden against the gloom, a silent signal cast like a stone skipping slowly across still water. Your hand reached out hesitantly toward the narrowing curve. The air grew heavy with expectation, the slow murmur deepening beneath the stones. Then, from the veil of shadow, a faint, deliberate sound unfurled. Not a step, but the soft scrape of stone against stone, ancient and patient, threading its way through the quiet. You froze, every sense alert, as the labyrinth breathed around you, its secrets folding closer. The watcher was near, once again, neither friend nor foe, but something altogether different, waiting just beyond vision, a presence moving with the slow certainty of time itself. You stepped cautiously beyond the fragile warmth of the dying embers, the cold grasp reclaiming its hold with relentless patience. The sharp edges of the stone corridor seemed to press inward around, trap the faint breath that escaped your lungs. Each droplet falling from the moss-clad ceiling carried a biting chill, striking the rough floor below with soft, measured taps that echoed like a slow heartbeat in the cavernous hollow. Your fingertips once again chatata the jagged ridges of the crystalline veins embedded in the wall, their faint shimmer a pale lantern in the dim stone gloom, their cold touch pricked through your skin like whispers from ancient depths, sending a shiver trailing down your arms. The air was thick with the mingling scents of dry earth, burnt resin, and a stranger presence, a faint metallic sharpness threaded through the dampness, as if the labyrinth itself exhaled secrets hidden under layers of time. The faint scrape you had heard hovered in your thoughts like a thin thread taut with suspense. You advanced, slowly, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of sound and silence wrapping the corridor. Pebbles skittered softly beneath your worn boots, crunching a cautious rhythm that blended with the distant dripping of water. Shadows gathered thickly at the bend ahead, pooling like the ink spilled from a carefully tipped quill, ready to write the next line in a story that stretched endlessly onward. A faint tendril of smoke curled upward, thin as a forgotten sigh, stirring the stagnant air. You bent closer to the source, pressing your palm to the cool stone near a fragile hollow where the slightest glow still clung. The embers were nearly spent, but their warmth seeped slowly into your fingers. A quiet pulse, tethered to the breath of the labyrinth itself. You breathed in the faint scent of smoldered wood, drifted thin, mingled with the lingering earthiness. A fragile comfort in this precise moment. Your senses heightened as movement brushed at the edge of your awareness. The watcher's presence seemed woven into the shadows, neither close nor distant. A silent weight, breathing with a rhythm older than time. You traced slow circles on the wall's rough surface, each motion pushing back at the tightening coil of unease curling in your chest. The flickering light of the dying flame cast long fingers of golden haze, reaching hopefully into the black that pressed in from all sides. You rose, cloaked once again in the thin fabric, its threadbare weave barely blocking the persistent chill. Your footsteps faded into near silence as you stepped forward, the cold stone cool and unforgiving beneath your feet. The passage curved gradually, walls closing to a pinched seam by the weight of waiting. The faint trace of rusted metal pressed beneath the stale air again, sharper now, like distant echoes hidden beneath the labyrinth's silence. A whisper of sound cut sharply through the stillness, not a footfall, but the subtle scrape where stone whispered against stone. Your muscles tensed imperceptibly, mind threading toward calm as your fingers sought the sickly gleam of thin veins tracing the wall's surface. Ale crystals caught a fragile glint of your fading light, their translucent edges shimmering with the ancient cold fire of the earth. You paused to catch a breath, the space between heartbeats stretched taut under the heavy cloak of quiet. Ahead, the passage broadened faintly into a chamber low and narrow, carved by the slow hand of time. The ceiling pressed down, mottled by dark moss that dripped slow. Uneven droplets, each puncturing the silence like a soft metronome, counting moments lost and yet to come. The floor lay scattered with fractured stone and twisted roots, their coarse edges biting softly into the soles of your shoes. You dropped slowly to your knees near a shallow pit lined with aged, cracked stones. Within, the embers flickered low, glowing weak but steady, casting a fluttering halo of amber against the walls. Spill over your narrow focus. The labyrinth breathed around you, low, slow, as if alive with a patience that outlasted the ages. The faint hum rose in tide-like waves beneath your skin, a silent pulse that drew your thoughts inward, looping in a steady cadence matched to the gentle flicker of light. Outside this fragile circle of glow, shadows crowded the edges, restless and heavy, folding upon themselves with an almost deliberate intent. The air tasted faintly metallic again, sharp and accusing, mingling with the warm, smoky ash that lingered in your lungs. You swallowed slowly, feeling the weight of cold seep deeper into your bones as the cloaked silence wrapped tighter. A sound broke through, barely more than a shifting breath, sliding low and slow across the stone like a silk thread drawn taut. Your heart clenched, and the slow echo of its beat pulsed loudly in the stillness. The watcher was near once more, moving not with haste, but with a deliberate silence that filled the space between seconds. You steadied yourself, tracing a slow circle with one hand against the wall, grounding your senses against the pull of uncertainty. The labyrinth seemed to pulse in response, the ancient stones absorbing, then releasing the fragile rhythm, to mingle with your own measured breath. As the corridor pulled in tighter, the ember's glow waned further, flickering like a fading star on the edge of night. Your gaze caught a sudden spark, cold and bright, slicing the darkness. A shard of light, too quick to hold entirely, yet unmistakably real. You turned, breath caught in quiet shock, tracing the slender gleam as it drifted just beyond the boundary of sight. And then the silence broke, soft, deliberate, a whisper like the drawing of a secret curtain. The labyrinth was awakening. You stepped forward, the narrowing passage embracing you like the final clasp of an old friend. Quiet, inevitable. The chill wrapped itself tighter beneath your cloak, but the faint warmth of the dying embers still pulsed softly beneath your palms, the fragile heartbeat in the labyrinth's heart. With every careful step, the weight of solitude no longer pressed as heavily. There was something shifting, subtle and inevitable, as if the maze itself exhaled a slow, granting breath. The metallic tang lingered, but now it carried hints, not of threat, but of revelation, an invitation woven into the silence. Ahead, the worn stone curved outward into a hollowed chamber, where shadows pooled. Page. The faint glow of crystals sparkled quietly, catching the softened light and scattering it gently across the walls. You settled onto the rough floor, letting the slow pulse of the labyrinth rise beneath you, like a muted song connecting past and present. Your fingers brushed the worn carvings nearby, grooves etched by countless hands, longing, maybe, for escape or understanding. Each line felt alive, a whispered testament to the rhythm of footsteps long since faded, but never quite erased. The watcher, once hovering in the edges of vision, was gone now, dissolved into the stone, or perhaps woven into the maze's very breath. And in that absence, the silence held a new shape, less a prison, more a quiet companion. You closed your eyes briefly and breathed in the faint of resilience and decay marking the passage of time here. The air had lost its sharp edge, softening around you like a slowly unfolding memory, fragile but persistent. A gentle drip echoed overhead, slow and uneven, stitching moments together with patient hands. Outside the narrow cocoon of this chamber, the labyrinth seemed to pulse less like a predator and more like an old heart, steady and waiting to beat once more. As you opened your eyes, the warmth of the embers breathed softly against your skin. Light flickered, casting the room in a tender glow, warming not just the cold stone, but the edges of your thoughts, now clearer, quieter. The maze's silence no longer threatened, but offered a fragile peace. The metallic scent faded, replaced by the earth's ancient breath, moist soil, moss, the hint of roots tangled beneath. Layers of stone. With every slow breath, the oppressive weight unraveled a little more, weaving space where calm could breathe. You sat a little straighter, feeling the roughness of stone beneath your fingertips, steady and real, a tether against the intangible. The labyrinth was less a place of endless wandering and more a canvas painted through centuries by those who had come before. Their stories, their waiting, were no longer chains but threads, gently guiding the way forward. Outside, a soft rustling stirred the moss overhead. No longer shadows lurking with menace, but the faint flutter of life. A moth, perhaps, or a stray leaf caught in a tender draught. The labyrinth stirred not with threat, but with quiet renewal. You rose slowly, the cloak's threadbare wool scraping softly against stone. A familiar murmur in the stillness. The path now seemed less confining, the walls expanding just enough to hold space for something new, a passage not just through stone, but through the lingering quiet of your own wandering mind. Each footstep forward felt lighter, the echo of your breath now a steady rhythm in the open chamber of your thoughts. The story of the labyrinth, its silence, its shadows, its secrets, settled around you like a whispered lullaby, coaxing a gentle acceptance. The last flicker of flame dwindled, folding into the slowly dawning light spreading from cracks unseen. The labyrinth held its breath once more, then exhaled softly, a breath upon your skin, a promise carried in the slow turning of stone and moss. You stepped through the narrowing archway, leaving behind the fragile ember's warmth, but carrying with you the quiet strength it kindled. Outside, faint rays of first light filtered through distant cracks, touching the cold stone with soft old. The maze stretched on, ancient and patient, but within you, the endless night had softened. The silence that once threatened to consume had become a space of rest, a pause carved from time's patient hand. You walked on, each step steady, the rough stone grounding you as the dawn painted slow shadows across the labyrinth's walls, and as your breath merged with the morning air, a quiet peace settled beneath your ribs, an ember of calm glowing beneath the vast, timeless stone. The labyrinth was no longer a cage, but a sanctuary. And as your footsteps faded into the soft rustle of awakening, the silence embraced you like a gentle ending, long, soft, and full of the promise of rest.